Cost of Victory, Book 1 of the Unseen Scar series by C.R. Saxon. Chapter 6. Giving his reflection a smile, John adjusted his blue silk shirt and left. Last night was rough, but cathartic. It didn't help Marcus figure out what to do. His island brother's entire province was gone. What 15-year-old had a plan B for that? Marcus was supposed to be ambassador to one of their allies, then marry. As a younger son, the gent was looking at a rather ideal life. But now? Did Marcus rebuild the province with a new set of people, or was walking away from nothing and finding a new life elsewhere a better choice? As much as John wanted to worry over this, he had duties to tend to. The 12th year suite was one floor up, and yet... He promised to help his ally put on weight, promised to take charge of the gent's diet, and all that entailed, but the attitude Ferdinand displayed toward his food for all those months in South Chuzo, he couldn't handle it. No, it was simpler than that. He couldn't handle the skeleton. Why did I agree to this? Ferdinand looked so pitiful, and he'd never live it down if his family learned he refused to help the gent. Besides, John couldn't remember the tinkerer asking for help before. Allowing a sigh to escape his lips, John activated the chime announcing his presence. The wait was longer than expected. Of the 3 residents, 2 were early risers, though it was more likely Ferdinand hadn't slept. The tinkerer was about to trigger the chime again when the door opened. A beautiful golden face emerged. Knowing the prince, Zephyr finished a morning training session and was in the middle of preparing for class. For some reason, his older ally looked confused and tired. Stepping into the shadows didn't take the gold from Zephyr's rich skin. It was as if every cell knew he was a prince. A tiny prince. It was awkward having someone 3 years older look up at him. "John, can I help you?" While Zephyr talked, he tapped his heart and spread his hand out. "He doesn't know. I'm here for Ferdinand." At the mention of his cousin's name, Zephyr's face darkened, hands clenched into fists. "He's not here. He walked up here shortly after classes let out. How did he not make it up 1 flight of stairs? Could you 2 have missed him coming in?" "The girls were over for an unofficial game night, and didn't leave till curfew. It's unlikely he snuck past all of us." Opening the door wider, Zephyr invited John in. "Feel free to check." "Thanks." With a bow, John headed to Ferdinand's room. It was empty, as promised. Zephyr folded his arms to stifle a flinch and grimace. "I apologize for the inconvenience my little cousin has caused you. These rude things are a bad habit of his. I'll tell him you're looking for him." Why is he already causing trouble? Can't he pretend for a day? "I wasn't here to talk, so don't worry about it." Starting at his cheek, one hand moved a pointer finger in an arc, stopping to point at John. "You weren't." With a sigh, he met Zephyr's onyx eyes. Even for an athlete, the prince was tiny. Ferdinand and Zephyr might be cousins, but the 2 couldn't be more different. It was John and Ferdinand who looked insufferably similar, something that annoyed them both. Believe it or not, I was tasked with feeding him. One eye twitched as disbelief took over the prince's small body. Golden hands danced. "Did I hear you correctly?" "Yeah, it's a long story." Golden brown bare feet roamed the islands, getting to know them. This paradise was more sparsely populated than Oya expected, but those who were here weren't like any humans she'd seen. Watching them was fascinating. Not everything they did was unheard of. Many people were unexpectedly adept at normal things. There was an island devoted to art. The pieces blew her mind. Another island was given to music. Oya loved this place. Never before did music feel like a living, breathing entity. This was the first appropriate music she ever enjoyed. The sounds it embodied moved her heart, both in joy and sorrow. A couple islands were reserved for extreme physical training. The children using those were faster and stronger than humanly possible, even under extreme stress, but they moved thusly with seemingly little effort. Guess I'm not the only special one. The most interesting island of all was a small one dotted with a dozen buildings. Children did the most fascinating things there. Though not great at science, it still intrigued her. She'd soon become acquainted with this island's resources. There were other children who didn't belong to one specific island. They wandered and used various facilities for superhuman feats. Manipulating energy to their will was captivating to see, lifting and moving boulders and trees, and other students, assembling things without using their hands. That left her envious. They even held back waves from the shore and disrupted the electrical grid. However, her absolute favorite was watching them fly. "I bet my friend can help me do that." Another interesting group was called healers, watching them force living bodies to heal. The man who found her could do this. So could the healer who traveled to the islands with them. But those were the first 2 she'd met who could. There was another reason for staking out the healers. Among them was a boy named Elu, who was supposed to classify her. according to Ferdinand at least. As this wasn't a choice she was given, she couldn't refuse. But the child couldn't classify her if he never saw her. A wicked grin stretched her lips. The last group, however, they weren't strong or fast, neither did they show great proficiency in arts or science. They couldn't manipulate energies or life forces either. It wasn't until she examined one that she realized their minds were open. They could hear or read the thoughts and feelings of those around them. Most were forced to experience this constantly, but a few had the ability to choose to listen. This made her giggle. How very ancient sci-fi. This place was fascinating. Yes, she'd have fun here. Waking up. When did I fall asleep? Ferdinand didn't recall feeling tired. Neither was Oya there. This was fair. Who'd want to watch someone sleep? Why do I feel... What was this? Disappointment? Maybe? You are the disappointment. Pushing it aside, he headed to the Sciences Island. Mind cleared and body refreshed, he focused on his next impossible challenge. Ferdinand went to the closet at the back of his lab. It was large enough to store his supplies and clothes. On the floor was a long, stuffed lounging sack for when he slept there. The shelf nearest the door held his medical discs. Since building them was relaxing, there was always a number ready to be sent out. Picking one at random, he held it to his chest and activated it. The light on top blinked red, then flashed green after a minute. What do I need to do? He didn't want to know, but there wasn't a choice. Looking at the information on the display, Ferdinand calculated how cooperative he'd have to be. If I gain 10 pounds like they want, I have to make sure I have time before returning home. But when would he be called home? Generally, he was allowed to go wherever he wished, but when a summons arrived, there was no ignoring it. Are you competent enough to do this? According to the screen, he'd lost 6 pounds at the hospital. The scent of the ginger sauce turned Ferdinand's stomach. What's this for? Dinner. John pushed it closer. Why? I was brought here to assist you, which means making sure you can work, so eat up. Being an interruption is hardly helping me work. Ferdinand kept his eyes averted. Sighing, John brought his hand to his head. They really didn't tell you. Tell me what? As much as he didn't want to, Ferdinand took the bait. John breathed in deep. Healer Bayer said, once you're done here, if you haven't gained some weight, they're sending you home. Shedding 4 pounds would take him back to where he was. Okay, this might be doable. I can do this. I can keep everyone happy. Liar. Putting that aside, he turned his focus to something more important, only to be interrupted. You're awake. Spinning in place, Ferdinand found exotic green eyes grinning at him. Oya, please don't startle me like that. There she sat on the edge of one of his lab tables, bare feet swinging. Getting her to wear shoes was a practice in the art of futility. It left Ferdinand feeling more defeated than before. Neither would Oya leave. Safety concerns were met with giggles. Those stunning green eyes danced around his immaculately kept lab. A sigh signaled his surrender. How come I can't? Ignore her wasn't the right end to that question. Neither was get rid of her, but the Tinkerer wasn't sure what the right words were. Everyone else left him alone. No one wanted to deal with him. Once his skills were no longer needed, they just disappeared until he was needed again. But not Oya. She kept coming back, even when he told her about Lu Yaozha. Does she pity me? Is that why she keeps coming? Jumping off the table, Oya waltzed around the lab, playing with the various equipment scattered about. Instead of fighting, he talked. Mostly he vented about his conversation with Zhao. He's a troublesome child, isn't he? Sitting down, Oya fiddled with the chain around her neck and gazed out the window. That's one way to put it. Talking to her eased his constricted chest. But was enjoying a conversation with her allowed? You deserve any of her time. A Cheshire grin split her face. What's this show he's so worked up about? There was no reason for her to be here, and it prevented her from making friends. If he didn't discourage this, he'd be hurting her, stopping her from finding happiness here. But once a year, family members with knowledge of the islands are invited for a week. The welcome show is the opening event. It's a spectacle showcasing the abilities of the student body, only we don't get to work with students from other classifications. Ah, how long is it? 2 hours, easy for the artists, but nearly impossible for the scientists, at least as long as I've been here. Really? If anything, it should be easier. Stupid child. Not sure how to take such a ridiculous statement, he continued. Zhao Zi wants something new. After 15 millennia of recorded human history, what hasn't been done? A small rubbery glob sat on a side table. It looked interesting and felt like the bouncy balls young children play with. What's this? A failed experiment. I was going to throw it out. You're a failure all the way around. Then let's throw it. Holding it up, Oya signaled for him to catch. Ferdinand gave her a grin and caught the makeshift ball. Does it have to be completely new, or just new to these people? Some of the people coming are the most cultured in the world. They've seen it all. Ferdinand gently returned the ball. Giving him a grin, she caught it and threw it harder. Are you one of those people? One who's seen it all? Yes, I can't blame Zhao Zi for wanting something new. Oya raised an eyebrow at his comment, but he simply returned the ball to her. Is something wrong? Ferdinand reached up, signaling he was ready. There's something I want to give you, but part of it isn't here yet. A present for a murderer. That turned him lobster red. Why? You don't have to give me anything. I know I don't, she smirked patiently, but I want to. His color deepened. Is she being nice? But why be nice to me? Is this a thank you? But it's my job. I promised to help. What does this have to do with the welcome show? The ball flew with a heh. If you're up for a trip to your little island, I could give it to you there. You'll have to wait for the rest when it arrives. Ferdinand stammered over words which never formed. Why is she doing this? I don't deserve any kind of consideration. No, you don't. Don't hog the ball. Oh, sorry. The skeleton tossed it back shakily, not entirely sure about the person before him. So, Oya caught the ball and changed topics. If everyone here is from a powerful family, who are you? Huh? Ferdinand's face lit on fire. I'm the 5th child of the Grand Duke of North Chuzo. Sounds stressful. Not really. The 1st and 2nd have it the worst. Their responsibility is enormous. The ball flew back. 5th child, huh? Are you the baby? If Oya was going to fulfill one task, she needed to know more about his world. Those bony hands jumped up to cover his ears before falling to his side. No, John is, but I have 4 older sisters and 2 younger sisters. Wow, matriarchal society? No, it doesn't matter as long as you do your job. But John's the baby. That boy seemed to be a bigger part of her friend's life than either of them cared for. Even the little string shooting out of Ferdinand's chest was getting thicker and brighter. Looking down at her own chest, no strings could be found, but John had so many it was hard to focus on any one in particular. Ferdinand, however, there weren't many, and what were there were weak. That might be why the hole in his chest was so bad. Ferdinand snickered and rolled his eyes. Yes, and he relishes in the position. They must dote on him fiercely. You put it perfectly. His parents and all 7 of his older brothers spoil him. They want him to stay the baby. And his is a matriarchal society, so you can imagine. Because he's a person worth keeping, unlike you. I don't know if I want to. Oya gave him a wink. Must be hard on his mother, as the only woman. Not really. Ruling males can't do anything without the approval of their wife or mother, whichever is the highest living matriarch. But mundane matters are usually left to the men. Women are all but worshipped there, so tedium and high-stress situations are for men to suffer through. The high regard Evelyn was receiving made Ferdinand smile. Not only was she female and the adopted daughter of the queen's first son, but she was the Oza, the hero who stopped the plague. Oishians would recognize her for what she did. Sounds nice, for the women anyway. Did she have so many children hoping for a girl? Ferdinand laughed and chucked the ball. Why am I laughing? Why does this feel nice? There was always the hope, but even if all 8 were girls, she would have had just as many. Mother Artemis loves children. She still loves them after meeting you. Mother Artemis? Oya smirked at such a silly name. Mother is the highest title in Oishi. Not calling her Queen Mother is rude. But she insists I address her as Mother. It feels wrong, so we've compromised with Mother Artemis. 6 and 7 siblings. That's too much for me. Nodding, Oya gave the ball a wild curve, and was impressed to watch him catch it without effort. There are a few students like my cousin. He's the only child. Most only have 2 or 3 siblings. Ah, do your sisters also have abilities? No, it's rare having 2 children with abilities. The mutation is strange. Either you have it or you don't. But it isn't passed on easily. The ball in his hands became impossibly fascinating. Don't worry, you'll never have the opportunity to curse the world with your spawn. Strange. I don't want to talk about me. Why would she want to know anything about me anyway? How about you? Tell me about your family. Oya's wild grin faded to something much softer. There's my mom and dad and my little brother. We've never had much, but my parents loved us and taught us as best they could. It must have been hard leaving them. I miss them with every cell in my body. This wasn't something Ferdinand understood, but he was sure John did. Think you're up for a run this evening? Alien green eyes all but glowed. I have to deal with John. You mean torture him? I'll meet you there then. Oya started to leave but spun back around. John seems surprised that you learned Ondo so quickly. How many languages do you speak? That question was unexpected. Officially, I know 3 modern and 2 ancient ones. And unofficially? Oya leaned back impressed. At least 1 more than that. You really are amazing. She gave him a grin and tossed the ball back, vanishing before he could dispute her. With Oya gone, Ferdinand went back to the project she'd interrupted. People were still dying. Why didn't he realize stopping the disease wasn't enough? How did I not think of this? How many people didn't have to die in all this? Why was I so stupid? Sitting down, Ferdinand continued reprogramming his little nanobots to rebuild cells instead of destroy them. All the while, the voice mocked him.